You want to say anything before we get started? You want to handle of your week?
I don't have anything else to say.
Okay. Item 1 on our afternoon meeting, the presentation by Union County Human Services. Mr. Ed?
Good afternoon. I'm Craig Fox. I'm Facilities Division Manager for Union County with the Public Works Department. I'd like to thank you all for allowing us to present this to you this afternoon. For everybody here who may not be aware, we're moving forward with the Union County Human Services Building, which will include the Department of Social Services as well as the Health Department of the county. The proposed site selection at this time is Skyway 601 at Concord Avenue. We've got a presentation that was prepared by our architects, and we've got a couple of options here, one of which we've chosen, and so I'm going to go ahead and move forward through the slides and start with the schedule and go from there. We'll go into more detail on the selected site plan. Okay, we've already submitted our rezoning documents to the City of Monroe at this point. We've gone through some user meetings. We had the neighborhood meeting on last Thursday, October 30th. Seemed to go fairly well. We had about 20 residents. Biggest concern that we got out of the residents was traffic impact and site lighting. Land Development Committee meeting, Technical Review Committee is tomorrow, and the Land Development Committee meeting is on the 13th. Basically, we're hoping to put out this to bid in August of 2015. Construction should start January of 2016 and last for approximately 18 months. Our desired, anticipated, and needed move-in date is June 30th, 2017, when our current lease expires with our current properties. And going through the site planning. There's the downtown Monroe area. The small oval is where we're currently located at Union Village, and the larger green site is the site that we're attempting to acquire at this time. There's an overview. That's just some of what's existing out there. It's a dilapidated house on the old Plyler Farms property. Right now, it's being surveyed. It's approximately between 30 and 31.5 acres. Here's some of the things that we looked at when we were looking at the site analysis. There was a much smaller requirement on Concord, but we want to make sure that this is very, very attractive to the surrounding areas. And so we've bumped up our streetscape buffer to 50 feet on Concord Avenue. On Skyway, it's already 150 feet NC DOT right away, so we already had a fairly decent buffer along there. As you can see, it calls for about 250 public parking spaces, which will be located along Concord Avenue, and about 400 staff spaces, which will be in parking lots along Skyway Drive. From our layouts, we've worked on this, we've refined this a little bit. You can see that shows the BMP, which is stormwater feature at the southern end of the property. It now, because of the survey and the topography, lends itself to be located closer to the intersection. This is the current configuration. We've moved it. We moved the building south a little bit and some of the parking south because of the BMP at the north end of the property. That's the general layout of our anticipated parking. As you can see, the Concord side of the Concord Avenue side of the building is the public side. Our architects like to refer to it as an open arms. Basically, what you've got there is you've got a drop-off area. People can actually come up and drop off. On the north end of the building, as you can see, it's not highlighted in green, but there's a little loop road there. A lot of their daily visitors are actually people who are just dropping off and picking up paperwork. So by creating essentially a drive-through window, it'll cut down on a lot of the people that are stop, park, potentially leave children in the car on hot days, things like that. So it's a very valuable amenity to the overall building layout. And getting into the program. Right now we're at about 175,000 square feet. The way the topography of the property lays out, The health department wants to be 2 floors on one side of the building, which would be the southern end, and the northern leg of the building will be 3 floors, which is the social services department, all tied in together in the back core with a rectangle that has all the common core services of both departments to include the central administration. And this is just some of how we got to our 175,000 square feet, how we got to some of the adjacencies within the building. If you look at the lower portion of this drawing where the scissors line is, that's kind of showing you what that central admin public entry area, the public entry will actually be on the 2nd floor. Because when you come into that 2nd floor, you'll have amenities to both DSS and the health department to your left and your right. That way you come in, it's either 1 floor down or 1 floor up. That's as much traveling as you have to do in the building to get to where you need to be. Now, if you take a cut, if you look there, the pink rectangle on the top of the cut diagram is your right-hand side. So this would be basically looking at the back of the building if you sliced a piece of the building off with your back to Skyway Drive. So you can see where Department of Social Services is 3 floors, Central Support and Human Services Admin is in the center, and on the left-hand side, Public Health is just the 2 floors with mostly mechanical space for the heating and air conditioning equipment in the basement. And that portion of the building doesn't actually get excavated all the way out. It only gets excavated to the point that we need the mechanical space in the basement. And to that point, the way the topography of the land lends itself, this also worked well for the building to avoid having to over-excavate the site. As we start going through the building, here's how the different levels lay out. Like I said, the upper right-hand drawing is level 2. That's your public entry area. That's where you'll get greeted. That's where you have all your wayfinding and your reception and everything that tells you where you need to go in the building. There's just a more detailed slide of level 1. The blue line, the light blue lines just show staff access, so that the public access shown in red, that's where they would go. Staff can circulate around behind in the corridors behind there to keep them separated from the customers as much as possible. This is level 2. This is your entry floor. This is where you're going to come in, and then we get into the renderings. You'll see how the architects have used the materials on the outside to lend themselves to a very welcoming building. You come in, you kind of already feel welcome when you walk, and you kind of know where you're at, and those reception areas will help guide you further in case you're not familiar with the building at that point. Level 3 is mostly cubes and offices. I'm sorry, that was level 2. Level 3, so you have put children's services up on the top of the level of the social services. That allows us to keep them protected and away from the general public in the situations that they need to be. That just kind of shows you circulation on level 3. Okay, getting into the exterior, the desire was to recall and use local materials, kind of recall some of the warehouse industrial space that's so much a part of the Monroe area. And one of our requirements is going to be that we use a local brick, try to make sure that it matches what's in the general area. This is the architects kind of just showing you what they had in mind as far as the open arms concept. The diagram on the left is the scheme that we've opted to go with. The one on the right was an earlier rendition. The one on the left, the reason we've opted to go with that is it's a more efficient design, cuts down on the square footage. The one on the right just has some challenges because you've got all the angles in there that don't make good use of space or taxpayer dollars within the building. Okay, on the diagram on the left, I apologize, it's kind of off the screen a little bit. The brown lines are showing you where there's going to be a brick exterior on the building broken up with windows. The light blue line shows a combination of cast stone and windows, and then the heavy blue line on the very front and the back, that's what they call a curtain wall. It's a slightly more expensive finish, but what it does, it allows you to see into the entire building and really see what's going on in the building as you approach it. Some early artist renderings of what our exteriors might look like. These are just some slide examples of what we're deciding to go with. The top 3 slides are what you're going to see on the long walls of the building as you either come down 601 and turn on the Skyway, because you've got those long approaches on those buildings, or as you're coming up Skyway or 601, you're also going to see it on the southern face of the building, which is those 3 right there. From there, we had further renderings to show us what we'd like. The selection that we've submitted to the Land Development Committee is the top slide. What it does, it allows for the most daylight into the building, just allows for us to utilize daylight, minimize the amount of lighting. They'll also use shading on the windows on the southern side to avoid overlight exposure, minimize the amount of drain on the heat and air conditioning system. Going into those areas on the diagrams where I showed you the shorter or the more narrow blue lines, these are the options they came up with for us. It's a mix of modern materials to give the building a contemporary design to mix with the recall to the more industrial side that the brick represents. Scheme A, or Scheme B rather, is the one we've opted to go with. There again, this one does not show the stormwater feature in the northern end of the property, which is where it is currently being proposed. If it's all right, I'll go ahead and skip through Scheme A since we've moved on to Scheme B. And there's more renderings of Scheme B as we go forward. Okay, so there again, this still shows the stormwater feature at the southern end of the property, but it'll get moved up closer towards the intersection. That's essentially how the building will lay out on the overall site. It'll be moved a little bit south because of the stormwater feature. Also, we anticipate DOT will like this better because it'll move both the staff and the customer entrance further down away from the intersection, a little bit further. Yes, sir.
Freddie Gordon, if you don't mind, I've just a quick question there. That in that slide, the top is the social services. Wasn't that correct? And the right is the medical.
Yes, sir.
Not that big a deal, but I was just wondering. I suspect that on the medical side, is that for supplies and things to come in back there on that back right-hand side?
Yes, sir. And there's a closer up view that I'll show you. Yeah. And realize that these are early renderings. That will be our service area, and we'll come up with some way to better shield it with some form of wall.
My curiosity only was you mentioned that on that building on the left, social services, where you're going to have like you call it a drive-up window, but whatever. You don't see a need for that on the medical side of that at all, or?
No, we've worked with the departments. As a matter of fact, we spent the last 2 days in detailed meetings with them, and for the most part, no, the need was much stronger on the DSS side, and right now the health department has not identified that as a programmatic need for them.
I was just looked like they would, but
since we're kind of looking at this from the 2,000-foot level, one thing I'd like to note that with laying the building out like we do, the heaviest volume of traffic is going to be the actual employees that are entering during a very short period of time in the morning and all leaving during a short period of time in the afternoon, which actually lends itself better to them entering and exiting from the Skyway Drive. Whereas the Concord Avenue side, they'll be trickling in all day long for different appointments. There are some times of the day when use gets a little heavier around lunchtime, things like that. But to that point, you'll put most of the traffic burden on Skyway Drive, which is better equipped to handle it. Kind of a long shot view coming up Concord Avenue as you approach the building. Looking in, you can just begin to start to see what that curtain wall is going to look like at the entrance as people will be dropped off. You can see the drive-up window on the left-hand side of the building. Getting in a little closer. And this would be if you're approaching the building, actually walking up through the drop-off lane. You can see where you've got the elevators, and it's only one floor up, one floor down, so you've got easy access to all parts of the building as you enter. That's what it would look like from the third floor, looking down onto the drop-off lane. Architects love their hollow people. And to your point, sir, this is what that side will look like. Like I say, we intend to screen that service area, but these are fairly early renderings of what we anticipated. That shows the window shades on the southern face of the building. Now this is the employee entrance. This is coming off of Skyway. You can see you've got a very small amount of curtain wall, but it goes the entire height of the stairwells. The idea there is that that'll be an employee access only entrance. So as employees approach the building, they'll need to badge in that back access. We hope to encourage them to use the stairs as they enter the building.
I've got a question. I know you've got the planted islands there. Is that strip of green, is that going to be grass also?
I'm sorry?
You've got your planted islands there where
Yes,
your
ma'am.
parking is. Is that going to be grass where the green goes on through the parking spaces?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good.
And you can see a small area out of the back that we plan to use for, it's like an employee patio. It's got the 4 green trees kind of planted there. We just want to make sure that there's enough amenities for the employees that they want to be able to use the building. Don't feel like they're kind of stuck there. One of our programmatic needs initially was to show if we had to expand this, and we're building plenty of expansion into this building from the get-go. But one of our needs, one of our programmatic requirements was to show us what would you do, how would you expand it if we ever had to expand it. And so that's what these gray blocks represent. It's basically just an extension of the 2 wings, which would also require us to put additional parking to the south of the building. Just another view of the back of the building, kind of showing you as you're coming down kind of from the corner of Concord Avenue and Skyway. Aerial shot looking at that approach of the building. Now this is the north face of the building as you're coming up Concord Avenue, kind of looking at the building out your car window. And then cost, as we were going through this, we were just making sure that our architects were doing their due diligence, and one of the things architects love to run away with is exteriors on buildings, and we had them prove to us that the exterior that they were presenting to us was not something that we could not afford as far as the budget goes.
Question.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
noticed you said something about the shading in the windows on the south side.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, did any thought go into perhaps solar panels that perhaps could have helped with heating? I noticed I didn't see any.
We haven't gotten to that point yet, and the challenge with solar is it's still relatively expensive. Where I don't want to get overly into it, but the solar panels rarely pay for themselves over the life cost of the building, and they're not always welcome by the public, to be honest with you. So we haven't gotten to those discussions yet. But at this time, I don't anticipate putting solar on this building.
And just out of curiosity, I noticed a lot of trees. What type of trees are you anticipate planting?
We haven't gotten that far. If there's, we'll adhere to any sort of city zoning requirements or preferences that you guys have on, that your planning staff has for that. I've been working closely with Doug Britt, and he's been a huge help to help move this project forward, as well as Councilman Kazai, and we appreciate everything you all doing to help us fast track this project along. It's an ambitious schedule. It doesn't sound like it, you know, from the schedule when you start thinking about June 2017, but the reality is it is a large government building, and it takes a long time to get to where we need to be from where we are.
Are y'all gonna, is it gonna be leads? Or, I'm not necessarily certified, but you're gonna have a lot of the lead stuff in there, the green?
Well, what we're doing is we're actually saving the money on lead and putting it into, you know, trying to look and make sure that we make the building as sustainable as
Okay.
possible without spending the money on the lead certification
Right,
itself.
because I think we had talked about that. I was just curious to make sure I remembered right.
Right. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
No, thank you very much for this presentation, and also know that we are behind you and we support what you're doing 100%.
Okay, well, thank you all for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. Item 2, discussion of the Laney Lee House. Who's handling that? Yeah.
Yes, Mayor and members of City Council, by request, this item was placed on y'all's agenda. Citizen comments were heard for the preservation of Lane Lee House during your public comment of a previous City Council regular meeting. Subsequent to those remarks, I asked Brian Bourne, our Assistant City Manager for Downtown and Parks and Recreation, to conduct a preliminary assessment on the possible costs and other considerations that might go into relocating the structure for this background for your possible discussion. That a preliminary assessment's been attached to your staff report. Should the board be inclined to advance this initiative, there's a number of considerations I would suggest that you be mindful of. You know, the breadth of this initiative and the role that the city might take in preservation of historic structures, the temporary and or permanent location of this particular structure, developing interest to develop public and private partnerships for this initiative and subsequent ones if they materialize, and also means of resourcing a preservation. If the board's so inclined, I'd like to invite Brian to highlight some of the key points from sessions that the Historic District Commission have held and some of their thought processes, as well as his preliminary assessment.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The Historic District Commission heard this on October 13th. They have no way of denying demolition according to the ordinance. They can delay it, and per our ordinance, that delay is 180 days or 6 months. And in that time, it's urged for St. Paul's to explore different options or alternatives to the demo. And in talking with St. Paul's, they are very much in the process of doing that right now. But demo remains an option. So that's kind of where it's at. It's my understanding they do not have the funds to demo the building currently. That cost was estimated at $100,000 to demo the existing house. And I know all of you kind of are aware of the house, but I just have a couple of pictures there of the house.
Brian, what part is the original structure?
It's my understanding that all of the structure that has the gable, the peaks, is the original structure. There's been additions along the back and all of kind of the flat roofed areas in the rear are the additions.
What year was the addition put on, if you know, Brian?
Oh, that's probably in some of this narrative somewhere. I don't know
Okay,
offhand, Mayor.
that's fine.
But, you know, it depends on the year, because an addition can be historic. It can be preserved, or it
That
can
was
be
gonna
gotten
be
rid
one of my
of.
questions. I mean, is it with the addition on long enough and intact to make it still historic and all that?
If it was done in the 60s, it probably is.
Okay. Oh, well, I'm sure it was done probably before that. I don't know.
That makes me historic, too.
I wasn't going there.
No one submit for National Register status, please. I'm not that old yet. But anyway, so that's where everything is. So the next step for them, they'd have to obtain a demo permit in order to demo anything. And that, like I said, is 186 months away if they have the funding and if that's the alternative they want to implement. Now, it was requested to look into a few options, like procuring a structural engineer to do some consulting, figure out the structure. Now, this is only to hire him as a consultant, and that cost would be between $500 and $1,000. That's not to estimate any of the repairs that might be recommended or required. Now, St. Paul's has hired a structural engineer to perform an assessment and come up with a list of necessary repairs. They've asked them to do that two ways. One, to bring it up to a residential code compliance. So part of that assessment will be looking at the structure and all of the wiring, plumbing to the residential standard. And then the other would be an estimate to bring it up to the commercial code compliance. So he's been charged with providing that list and coming up with estimated cost for the necessary repairs. In my conversation with them, they're willing to share that information with all parties or share that with us. Now, in 2003, an estimate was done to rehab the Laney Lee House, and those costs were estimated between $400,000 and $550,000. So that estimate's a little dated. There might be a little more deterioration. No one knows that until we get into it. I don't know the extent of how that estimate was derived. So there might be some updating done to that number via the previous statement, bringing it to commercial or residential code. So it may be a little different. The relocation of the house to a temporary site. Relocation is going to be required. The house will be cut into 8 pieces. The roof will have to be removed, and the house will have to be cut into 8 sections with dimensions of 25 feet by 54 feet. And the temporary site is about a mile away. It is city-owned property. Those sections, those 8 sections, have to be cut in those dimensions because of the right-of-way constraints from that property to the temporary location. You're going through narrow streets within an urban area to get there. Power lines, traffic signals, landscaping, all of those things drive cost and interfere with the relocation. So the width of that house will have to be 25 feet wide on a truck, 54-foot length. The relocation is estimated at $300,000. Now that's the relocation of just the 8 pieces. That's not to put it back together, which would involve an architect and a structural engineer and additional cost on the temporary site or on the permanent site. If it's a temporary site, you're looking at another move. Now, how do you stabilize those 8 pieces on a temporary site, or do you reconnect them and require to cut it again, to move it again? Those are all details that need to be worked out in the whole process. So that $300,000 to a temporary site could possibly go to $600,000 to get it to a permanent
If
site.
it's sitting there in 8 pieces too, look what the weather's gonna do.
Right, well, you'd have to, I guess, weatherize and seal and
Well, that's another
mothball
$100,000.
those 8 pieces if you're leaving them.
Well, if St. Paul was looking at the architect about bringing up commercial and bringing up residential, if they look at that part, are they saying at some point we might fix it up residential or commercial? Or why would they be doing that if they're not interested in maybe doing that?
Well, like I said at the beginning, they are exploring all the options they have before them.
Yeah.
Or that they're not ruling any of them out, and they're not saying that demo is imminent. They're exploring all options, is what I've been told.
Brian, where is that temporary site?
In order to get the relocation moved, we own, it's 2 lots out on Parker that we own, 800 and 802, I think it is, if I remember my notes correctly. Yeah, 800 through 802 Parker Street. So that's about 0.7, about a mile away from the current site. That was
Cost
the
$3 million
closest-
to move it. I'm sorry, I brought you.
Now, in discussions with St. Paul's, they are talking to Ted Alexander from Preservation North Carolina
$3 million.
to explore options, look at the different alternatives they have. And some, there are lots of different ways to do this. Mothballing the property where it is one, meaning it's weatherized, it's weather tight, the structure's stabilized, and the house just sits there. And the ground, it just buys time, is what it does. That's an alternative. Relocating it is an alternative. Rehabbing it is an alternative. And demo is also an alternative. They're also, I think, in the near future, going to be talking, the State Historic Preservation Office may be making a visit to kind of talk about alternatives also. So, I mean, they're working and exploring all the options.
Well,
And then that's what's been found since the request made at our previous meeting.
Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to see if maybe we could not get a group of stakeholders to look at this, because this is a historic building in downtown. Plus, we've lost a lot of historic businesses, which is what I hear from a lot of people. And if there's a way that we could help, I know that we're in a deficit for next year, but maybe if everybody could sit down at the table, we could come up with a solution to this problem, or a way to save this house. Maybe if everybody sits down, the city, the church, the group that's interested in preserving it, maybe even the historic preservation, and seeing if there's an alternative that we can come up with. And I'm not saying spend city money because we don't have any, and we know we're going to be in a deficit, but there's a possibility we may have property if they could figure out a way to move it. I just think that maybe if we just all sit down and have an open conversation.
Brian, what does the church want to do with the property?
Well, that's something that I haven't been able to determine definitely right now. They've mentioned something about a meditation garden, a park-like area. That may be the case. I don't know. I get a feeling that the house cannot remain on the property. If they can sell the house, they can't sell the property. So it was a donation to the church, so that might be something in the donation or whatever.
Well, the thing is, we need some time right now to figure out what to do, and they're not in a hurry to demolish the house. And I know that we cannot stop them demolishing the house because they own it.
Right.
But if we could all sit down and come up with a workable solution for everybody,
And that's what that 180-day period is for.
but
Well,
it may not be enough time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Is
worried
that
about.
180 days final, or that's a period, and then you can apply for another 180 days?
I don't
No,
think you can apply for another.
Let me go ahead and note that the 180-day period that's the maximum delay the commission can put on it. At that point in time, the property owner has the right to demolish it. What will then happen is that they have a period of time in which to act on the certificate of appropriateness, but if they, for some reason, don't get it done within that time, which would be potentially another 6 months, up to a year, but they have the ability to tear it down no matter what. So it's not that it's delayed further. That's the first point in time they could tear it down, which again does not mean they have to tear it down.
Right.
Because as Brian pointed out, they may not have the funds to do that, and with an older structure, you will end up seeing asbestos removal and other costs that you wouldn't see with a less historic structure.
Why don't we,
And there's some, that made me think of
Yeah,
something,
there's
another
asbestos.
point. The original structure versus the added-on structure, moving it. Well, in discussions, there's no real number on that. But in order to get the house down to the original structure, you'll have to demo off the additions. You'd have to remediate those environmental issues if they're asbestos before you demo. You can't just bring a bulldozer in and tear that off. It has to be done sensitively to save the original structure. And the thought and the thinking that was done is that it really probably wouldn't be a significant cost savings just moving the original structure, because the original structure will still have to have the roof removed, and it will still have to be cut into those 25 by 54 pieces in order to move it, along with that additional demo environmental work. So I don't know, there's some more discovery that could be done in that
And
regard.
it is one of the oldest houses in Monroe, am I right?
Yes, yes. There's some debate about the additions detracting from that, but
Yeah.
from what I've understood, it is one of the oldest in Monroe.
if it costs $3 million to move it, $300,000, I don't know how I get this big, $300,000 to move it, and another $300,000 to move it to a permanent lot, plus putting it back together.
Plus, and that's an unknown.
That's right. So we talking, better than 6, we just don't know what the better is. 6 million.
And then the
6
rehab
million
cost,
plus, yeah.
the rehab cost of four to 550. Well, that's pending the investigation they're into now with the structural engineer.
Well, that's gonna be $7 or $8 million. If they
So
move it.
it's approaching one.
And
1
I agree with Dottie, some way we could save this thing. We got the time out there, the 6 months or whatever. My suggestion would be, let's let staff stay on top of it. Come back and give us a report where we at. I'm talking to council and everybody. Come back with us a report, and when you feel necessary. I don't know if you'll have something in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks. But come back at the earliest point, if you've got something, and share with us, and let us see where we need to go with meetings or whatever. That's my suggestion.
Well, I have encouraged the group that would like to save the house. I have encouraged them to sit down with the church, because the bottom line ultimately is the church's property. They can do what they want. But I'd like to see if there's a way that we might could save this house, or we could buy some time, if they would give them additional time, maybe to figure out how they can come up with money, maybe a public-private partnership or just a private partnership that will help save the house.
Yeah. You can mothball it, you can rehab it, you can relocate it, but if you demo it, all the 3 previous options are gone.
Oh, that's
They're
right.
gone. So that needs to be your last, that has to be.
Okay, that,
When is the structure engineer making his or her report?
I think it's going to be several weeks before we can get that information. The church will be able to share that with us.
Mayor, one point I just wanted to add to what I had said. Under our zoning ordinance, the certificate of appropriateness to demolish will last 12 months after it's issued. The certificate of appropriateness won't be issued until the end of the delay period. So we're looking at an 18-month period that they have to knock it down. Now, they could start doing demolition work in that 12-month period, and that as long as they do a little work, there's not a lot saying that they have to take the whole thing down. They could start, and an argument can be made: is it pulling out a window? Is it pulling out some piece of the structure? That may allow them to keep going. So we're looking at up to 18 months for them to do it, and possibly even longer. So, but this, of course, allows time for the discussion between the church and anyone interested in preserving.
Well, I think that would give us time too, if staff keep us up to date.
We'll do that.
When you get it, let us have it. Until
Okay.
6 months later down the road. That's my suggestion, that the council have anything they want to add to that. If not, we'll ask you to do that,
All right.
Larry.
Thank you.
Along with the
Thank
staff.
you.
Thank you for the information. It's a good report, sir. Okay, item 3, discussion of city council travel. We got all of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, we've got before us, some different travel policies, that various cities have. I hope you've had a chance to look over it, and, so we can discuss ours, if you wanna discuss ours and compare it, or if you've got some plan that you wanna put on the table at this time, we'll do that. But like I say, we've got it in front of us of various cities, and if you wanna use that, if we wanna use that, we've got it to use. If not, we'll proceed with our discussion.
Well, Mayor, I'll say this, I don't have a problem with our travel. The Finance Committee looked at this earlier, and they went through and fine-tuned it, is my understanding, with, and basically, this is the same policy that former Councilmember Ashcraft and former Councilmember Smith came up with, because I served on that committee also. So, you know, I know the Finance Committee looked at it this year, and there was some verbiage that was changed. It was not a lot that was changed by the interim city manager. So, you know, I don't have a problem with the way it is written.
Okay? Anyone else?
The unit cost for the various conferences, is this an average, or where did you get these figures? Is this one person that went, is this for the fall conference, spring conference, is that an average? Or
It's using threshold of the highest cost that was accumulated for attendance at the various conferences, whether it included companion or not. It's inclusive of registration, travel, per diem, and lodging.
It's the basic stuff when we
Okay.
go to a conference.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I thought.
That's per individual.
Yes. So that's, yes, I would represent that, or reinforce that, whether they're talking about Town Hall Day at $725 or the NLC Fall Conference at roughly $3,800, that's inclusive of registration, travel, per diem, lodging, and in some cases may have included a companion.
Well, I see that there's, I'm sorry.
Just basic rule of thumb, if it's out-of-state travel, companion cost might be 20 to 40%, depending on airfare, things of that nature. In-state is probably 10 to 20% of the cost that you see represented on that sheet, just as a rough rule of thumb.
Well, I see that there's some things that we do need to attend, like spring conferences or the National League of Cities, and we do need to attend those. Not sure that everybody needs to go, but certainly we need to have some representation. And with the budget that we have, with the deficit and everything, I think it might be easier if everybody just had their own pot of money, so to speak, as several of the other cities that you've checked do. And so I think that we can probably come up with an amount for each council member, and not to be transferable between council members. And I think that would probably be a good idea to do that. Looks like if you add the two conferences together, you're about $6,000–7,000. I think that's a gracious plenty. That's something you can pick and choose to go to. You certainly don't need to go to both, could go to one. So I think that would probably cut down on a lot of any type of impropriety or somebody saying anything. And also, I think that we need to change back. The mayor does need to look at the travel. According to our charter, the city manager is over the staff. The mayor is over the council. He is the head of the council. We should not put a city manager in the position to approve travel. I think that that can be done in conjunction with the mayor and the finance director to make sure that the funds are there, and to make sure that it is a public purpose. But I'm going to make the motion that we do this. Every individual council member gets a certain amount of money. I'd say probably the average between the conferences. I don't have a problem with anything else as far as the companion, but I do think that we do need to limit that, and it's not transferable, and that the mayor replaces the city manager as far as looking over the travel. I put that in a motion.
Well, that's completely opposite of what the finance committee, they didn't have a problem with the policy to start with.
That's true. That's true.
Okay, and you were on that finance
That's
committee.
exactly right. But this is reactionary, just like I was said the last council meeting. A lot of times things are changed as a result of things that happen. So I think if we do it this way, it takes away if anybody saying anything else. Everybody has their own pot of money. Everybody does that, and then that way it's not going to cause that much.
Well, I do have a question still. One thing that's not been taken into consideration with what you're saying is the mayor and I both serve on steering committees that we represent the city. We're appointed by North Carolina League of Municipalities, and we represent the city at the National League of City Conferences. And we also, lots of times they'll have a steering committee meeting that's separate from these two conferences, so that we end up traveling. They reimburse part of it, but they don't reimburse all of it. So that's not even in the options you're saying there.
Well, just like what I had said, we need to prioritize, figure out what it is that's important, what we need to go to. Other cities, or I haven't seen anything here go over $6,000. Other cities are doing it. We can do that. Certainly, if, how much is Charlotte here? Charlotte is, $5,800 per council member, $8,000 for the mayor. I don't see that we need to go more than Charlotte. I don't see that that's
How much
an issue.
How much you say, Charlotte?
It's $5,800 per council member, $8,000 for the mayor.
I heard 1,500.
A question and comment, if we have a set amount, which I do agree with, per council member, doesn't make any difference who approves it or disapproves it, because you have the amount either way. The second thing, as it comes to priorities, each of us have enough common sense and professionalism to decide what our priority is, and doesn't need to be set by anybody else.
Well, no, I don't think nobody said they was gonna set any priority
But it was
for you.
alluded to that, so that's why I made that statement.
Mayor, I second Ms. Duncan's motion.
Of course.
How you gonna, have you decided, or what you gonna, when you're talking about this, the monies, I have not heard, I've heard one, money's discussed, but I haven't heard what you're gonna wanna make your motion to set it at.
Well, I think we need to take the two conferences, whichever one was the highest, and average those two together, put them together, and do that.
Let's see.
And then that way you get to choose what it is that you can travel, where you're gonna go.
Okay, I'm just looking at it.
Well, I personally think this needs to go back to the finance committee and have them come back with a recommendation. That way they will look at all the stuff and let them come back to the council, since it came from the finance committee to start with.
Mayor, I would note that from a Robert's Rules perspective, you do have that motion on the floor. If what the Mayor Pro Tem is asking for is essentially a substitute.
I'll make a substitute motion. This goes back to the finance
You
committee.
could do that
for
and you
further
could
study.
vote on that.
All right, let me make sure I understand. Now, your motion will be for the finance committee to make a recommendation.
To look at this and come back.
You're talking about a recommendation for the amount of money?
Recommendation for them to come back with what all the discussion we have had.
Okay.
Yeah, however you want to look at, whether it's the amount of money or the amount of travel, have it go back to the finance committee with their recommendation, bringing it forward, rather than us having so much discussion here with throwing out numbers. This way, they say this is a set amount.
Okay, I have a motion. Any other discussion?
Mayor, that fails for lack of a second.
Oh, well, we need a second.
Because it's for a substitute. Substitute does.
Okay. Well, you call for a second on hers, then what you said, I need to call for a
Yes,
second.
sir. Well, you don't have to call. It's if there is one or there isn't. It's just a note that I haven't heard one yet, Mayor. And
Okay.
Saluda just seconded.
okay. Then you now then
Okay, we vote on the first one.
No, you vote on the substitute first, Mayor, and then if it succeeds, then it is the motion. If it fails, then you go back to Councilmember Duncan's original motion.
Okay. Councilman Nash, would you mind doing that one more time?
I just, substitute motion was to make the recommendation, this goes back to the Finance Committee so they can fine tune what the discussion has been and bring it back to the council with the amount and what we need to do.
Okay, I have Ms. Nash's motion.
I hate to muddy the waters on this, but I get where both of these motions are coming from. However, with this document and the unit cost and the various things that apparently some council members have attended, is that what this document is all about?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And then, finance is typically numbers. It's dollars and cents. And coming up with what either is budgeted totally and how we ended up, if it's individual or whatever, is another thing too. And then there's the policy issue. And typically, would that be a finance committee area?
Well, I would think they would come back with the recommendation and then we would change it into policy. Is that the way it works?
That's my understanding, yes. They would come, if it goes that way, it would go to, my understanding, it'd go to them,
They would
come
look at
back
the
with a
numbers.
recommendation.
Yeah, they would look at the numbers and they would come back with the total amount
On the number.
on the numbers, and then it would go into a policy at that point in time.
Well, that would seem logical to me. The number side is one thing, the policy, if you change that, is another thing. There are two different items as far as I'm concerned, and it's obvious, pretty obvious here, that as you look at other municipalities, which may or may not be similar to us, they all have varying policies. So there's a little bit of I won't call it pick and choose, but various ways that you can go either or, so.
So what you want to do is go back to the Finance Committee to come up with the amount. Is that what you're saying?
The amount, and, you need to be able to figure out that we don't ever put enough money in the budget for all council members to travel. I think it was, 27,000 this past year, something like that. So there's never enough money in the budget for everybody to travel. But these are conferences that all of us have an interest in. So we just need a total dollar amount that each council member is going to be assigned. And then it needs to become a policy after that. Am I correct? We need to work a policy to.
They would bring it back with a recommendation, if I understand it right, Ms. Nash, and we would vote on that to make it a
But
policy.
it's interesting to me, and I'll ask our attorney, Charlotte allows their council members $5,800, their mayor $8,000. We're a city of about 1/20th size of Charlotte. Is that not right?
We are significantly smaller. One of the reasons why I'm a lawyer and not a doctor is I'm not spectacular at math, so I couldn't tell you how much smaller we are. But it would be close to what you're saying, perhaps 1/12. But you do also have that is the numbers that Charlotte has used. Fayetteville has put a $2,000 per mayor and council member. Greensboro is $10,000 for the mayor, about $5,300 for the councils of members of the council, and Greenville, North Carolina, is at $3,000 per member. So it is whatever number that those councils feel is the appropriate number.
I tell you, I don't see why we don't allocate, just like Charlotte does, $5,800 per council member and $8,000 for the mayor. I just don't see going any higher than that, and it puts the city manager in an awful precarious position when he's having to make decisions on this when the mayor should be doing that. That's my comments.
If I could suggest,
Yes.
to get back to Mayor Pro Tem's point and Councilman Gordon's point, there's two issues out there, I guess, is the dollars, which in my mind is a budget process decision that we will be beginning shortly, and the other is the policy side. Both may warrant discussion in the Finance Committee.
Right.
But to get at the idea that Councilman Duncan was suggesting, which was essentially earmarking dollars per individual, touches on both budgeting, which we have a process for, and then the policy side. So taking it back to the committee would allow at least to hammer out a policy amendment if the committee was so inclined to recommend that.
Yeah.
And whatever the dollars, whether it's so many dollars per individual or it's a bucket of money as it is today, is going to be dealt with in our budget process, unless you see fit to amend the budget as it stands today.
Well, you know, there's virtually, I'm not an accountant by any stretch of imagination. And these may or may not be things, you know, that some or all the people have attended before, but if this were just individualized, this is over 12,000 per member to attend just these events.
The numbers get big fast.
Right.
Yeah, they do.
So,
Well, we,
you know, I think that at some point, it would be prudent that, you know, once we come up with this number, and, you know, I don't see any way you're gonna be able to make enough money for a council. I include the mayor and the council, 7 members and spouses to go to these events. You know, you're gonna be looking at a lot of money.
that don't mean everybody's
No,
gonna
they
go
don't
to
usually
these.
go.
That amount of money won't be spent. No, this is what's out there that the city participates in, such as the National League of Cities. In fact, there's not, what, 2 or 3 going this time to that? The town hall day, 1 or 2 go to town hall day. Of course, it's there for each individual to choose to go, and that's what they're trying to do, is set what each individual should get in order if he chooses this. So, no, everybody on the council will not be going to all these at all. So, I heard what you say, Freddie, talking about the finance committee, and I hear what you saying there.
What I'd like to do, Mayor, is I'll withdraw my motion, and what we'll do is go ahead and go back to the Finance Committee to hammer out exactly the details, how much money that we're going to put in there. Then we'll bring it back. After that, we could bring it back and discuss it at the full council.
Anyone else? You have something?
No, I'm just thinking she had a substitute
Okay.
motion. Did we ever vote on it?
Well,
No,
I
no.
just took
She's
mine out,
withdrawing
so-
her, so we're coming to that one.
Okay.
One thing though, if, with the finance committee discussing it, we're gonna start budget in January, so that would be an ideal time to, in my opinion, to look at it and have the discussion on, for the future year, what's gonna be done.
Well, that's true. Well, right now, we don't have anything after Austin. There's not anything in our travel budget anyway.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's a moot point until July, but we can do that and just figure out what you want.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, but we'll send that back to the finance committee, and come back with a recommendation at a later date. All right.
That certainly segues right into the,
What,
Budget
Freddie?
calendar.
I say that segues right into the next item on the agenda,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
fiscal year budget calendar, item 4, Mr. Larry.
Yes, Mayor and members of the City Council, as a follow-up to some brief remarks at your last meeting that I made, regarding a retreat and so forth, I've been vetting potential facilitators and finding it's requiring more time than I had anticipated. My intent was to encourage y'all to have a retreat in early December. That doesn't look feasible, and I would urge us to consider shifting it into January, early January. And I've got some dates to suggest for your consideration this afternoon. The session approach that I'm hearing being advocated by most of the facilitators that we've talked to thus far, basically 3 elements, if you will: a kickoff meeting, possibly as options, individual sessions between facilitator and participants, and then the actual retreat or goal-setting session. The purpose of the kickoff meeting would be to outline the approach that a particular facilitator might use, the parameters and the outcomes that we wanted to forecast or set as expectations. Individual sessions, more to allow the facilitator and individuals to develop a rapport, get a sense of insights, values, interests, and then the payoff is a retreat where we hopefully achieve some consensus on long-term goals. My suggestion that I would offer you all to consider in terms of kickoff meeting would be after the Thanksgiving, I think it's after the Thanksgiving holidays, definitely, no, I'm sorry, before the Thanksgiving holidays, after we get back from the NLC conference, that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 24th, 25th, or 26th. The individual sessions then we would try to schedule those during the first week of December, in and around your singular meeting in December, and then conduct a retreat one day of the week of January 12th through the 16th. And so I guess what I'm asking of you now is, are those dates, 24th, 25th, 26th, agreeable? One of those days?
We think.
Right into Thanksgiving holiday.
That's Thanksgiving.
That's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the week of Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I've got too much to
Thursday,
do that week
Thanksgiving,
after
right.
that. I'm not available.
Okay. Are there alternative dates that the board would like me to consider?
It'll have to be after the 1st of December.
Would that be agreeable?
Okay, now, so these are all pre of any retreat you're talking about?
I'm recommending, short answer is yes. I'm suggesting basically 1 to 2 hour kickoff meeting with the facilitator.
Right.
It could coincide, if we look at the first week of December, it could coincide with this meeting, maybe an hour earlier.
I believe we only have one meeting in December, isn't that correct?
We only
Yes,
have
sir.
one meeting.
Yeah. So, well, I would rather do it the first week of December personally than the week of Thanksgiving. As far as the time goes, I don't, that'd be fine with me. Unless you have some other pressing issue that needs to be taken over in a strategic planning meeting, we could, in fact, use this time for that, and then be less time that you're gonna have to ask us to be here again, you said. I don't have a problem coming at 3 o'clock, no.
Yeah, 3 o'clock would be fine for me.
Super. Does the week of January 12th through the 16th, are any of those days or all those days inconvenient to the board?
What day is that, Larry?
12th would be a Monday.
Monday through Wednesday?
Monday through Friday, 16th,
So
12th through the 16th.
my suggestion would be probably Mondays are typically not good, so either Tuesday or possibly Thursday. Wednesday tends to be a church evening, so I would suggest trying to stay away from Wednesday.
Well, I'd
Tuesday's
rather
always
do the
better.
13th, which is Tuesday
No,
personally.
Tuesday's always a better day for me then.
I'll go with 13.
Okay.
Okay.
Super.
Does that get item 5, 4 and 5 all in
4 and
one?
5, yes, sir.
I thought we'd done both of them in one. Okay, council have anything before we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
You want these passed back in?
All right.
I can, it's either if you don't want to keep them, I'm happy.
Yeah, we need to pass that back up.
You ready?
We will come back at 6 o'clock if we are.